Welcome to Future Forward Reunification Therapy. I want to talk about a big question that may have been on your mind. The question is, if you're experiencing alienation from your child, whether it be mild, moderate, or severe, is it possible to heal this relationship? Is there a process or a treatment for helping families to move forward, get unstuck, find their way back to healthy relationships? My name is Lisa Rothfuss, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker in Austin, Texas, with 36 years of experience counseling children and families, and I specialize in working with reunification therapy and issues of alienation. I even offer an intensive 4-day reunification intervention for children who have been severely alienated. I worked for 9 years in the Texas family court system as a guardian ad litem, a court-appointed therapist, and a co-parent counselor. The overall message I want to give you today is that it is absolutely possible to reunite with your child, no matter what level of alienation or various obstacles you may be experiencing. And I want to start by telling you some of the amazing stories of hope and reconnection I have seen in my practice, despite some very overwhelming odds against the rejected parent. The first story is of a mother that came to me because she hadn't seen her 14-year-old son since she remarried several years ago. At that time, her new husband began to attack her son's father on social media sites, making many negative, accusatory statements about him. And this situation was very upsetting and emotionally disruptive to her son's life. This new husband's behavior provoked a major police investigation, caused a lawsuit, and a very high-conflict court case. Consequently, she lost custody of her son. She was devastated and wanted to build back her relationship with her son after several long years of not seeing him. The court finally ordered reunification therapy and asked me to assist them in reuniting. Her ex-husband had used this situation to alienate her from her son and put up every roadblock imaginable to interfere with the therapy and prevent them from having a chance to rebuild their relationship. Her son was, of course, very scared to see her after all of this time. But at that very first meeting, when they saw each other for the first time in 2 years, they both began crying and laughing and talking together with their old familiar mother-son banter. After a few months in reunification therapy, they began to have unsupervised visits outside of therapy, although their time was very limited together, and his father often didn't bring him to the visits at all. They continued to build back their relationship, and the son started to see his mother's family and half-siblings again. A deep bond grew back between them and has continued to develop through his teenage years. Eventually, the mother divorced her second husband because she didn't want to jeopardize her relationship with her son ever again. Despite 2 years of separation, multiple high-conflict court cases, her second husband's combative behavior, her ex's resistance to allowing her parenting time, and looking for things to prevent her from seeing her son, they still reunited successfully and are close today. I had a mom who was accused of sexually abusing her young son and physically abusing her daughter. She lost custody while an investigation was done, and during this time, the father remarried and began to have the children call the new stepmother mother. While living solely with him and his wife, he constantly reinforced how dangerous the mother was and that he was fearful of them seeing her again, as he felt she would continue to hurt them. Mom was finally exonerated, and during a temporary orders hearing, the mom was awarded back 50-50 custody with the assistance of reunification therapy. A guardian was assigned to evaluate the case, and psychological evaluations were ordered before the court would make final custody determinations. During this time, I began working with the whole family, but Dad quickly stopped coming to sessions with me after I confronted him about bad-mouthing the mom in front of the children. He would cry continuously and say they are in danger. However, I kept working with the mom and the two children because there was a lot of disrespectful, rude behavior, temper tantrums, and acting out on the children's parts. I had to work with her on learning different parenting styles and strategies for how to handle a situation in which she is constantly being undermined and badmouthed by the favored parent. Despite the fact that this mom completely lost custody for a year and a half, was badmouthed and called a sexual and physical abuser by her ex and his wife, had to continue to share 50-50 time with an alienating parent, she still has been able to keep a relationship with her children due to reunification therapy. I did a 4-day intensive reunification therapy intervention with the father and his 3 children. This dad decided that he wanted his mother, the children's grandmother, to attend the intervention. This grandmother had not seen her grandchildren for 2 years. However, previously, they had been very close. The dad felt that having his mother come would be calming and supportive to the children during the reunification intervention. And this did turn out to be the case, as when they saw her that first day after a long separation, they ran into her arms and gave her a big hug. There were smiles and an instant feeling of ease. She was able to help the children feel comfortable talking during the 4-day intervention. And she told me later that seeing them again was one of the best days of her whole life. And doing the reunification process with them was a real miracle because she did not think she would ever see them again. Despite the long court battle to get this reunification therapy ordered, despite the children's mother's intense dislike for this grandmother, 2 years of the mom bad-mouthing the dad and the grandmother, the reunification process still happened, was successful, and they recently spent a whole week at her house this summer. I share these stories of hope and give this presentation because I want to offer a roadmap of hope to parents, grandparents, and clinicians who are courageous enough to take on the challenges of reunification therapy. This roadmap will include, number 1, defining what reunification therapy is. Number 2, what is needed for a good reunification therapy process. Number 3, what kind of qualifications should you look for when finding a reunification therapist? Number 4, how to evaluate a case and determine what kind of treatment is appropriate. Number 5, techniques and strategy used in treating mild, moderate, and severe cases of alienation. And number 6, the top 3 mistakes made when doing reunification therapy. In this segment, I want to talk about what reunification therapy is. Reunification therapy didn't really make an appearance as a form of treatment for alienation until around the year 2000. This is a very new form of treatment for children resisting possession and access with a parent. And reunification therapy is still in its experimental stage of development. There are no process and outcome research studies to inform us around this kind of treatment. There is only guidance by experienced family therapists and forensically trained mental health practitioners to offer standards. Reunification therapy is not codified or uniform in the family law system and is largely left up to the individual family court to determine the reunification protocols. What is reunification therapy? The role of the therapist in reunification therapy is unique and different from traditional family therapists because it requires an interdisciplinary way of operating in which the therapist interfaces with the legal system and becomes a court-appointed specialist for the court. This therapist not only needs to be trained clinically, but become well acquainted with the family court system and the laws in their state. Reunification therapy follows a family systems model in which the identified patient is the family. It is a focused and structured intervention that requires all family members interacting with the child to participate. Reunification therapy has specific goals, which are: number 1, to assist a child in overcoming visitation refusal. Number 2, address any fears or phobias the child's experiencing around reconciling with a parent. Number 3, working on clarifying false narratives the child may be harboring about the target parent. Number 4, reframing situations the child might have experienced that led to the alienation. Number 5, monitoring ongoing communication and behavioral patterns between the target parent and the child as they reunite, assisting them in building back more positive interactions. And number 6, monitoring the alienating parent's anxiety about the reunification process and addressing any issues of obstruction from that parent. But above all, the safety and the well-being of the child are always the priority. In this segment, I want to talk about what is needed for a good reunification therapy process. And the first question to address is whether an order for the court is required to receive reunification therapy. The answer in most cases is yes. A court order is almost always needed. And you need a court order particularly if you know that the other parent doesn't want counseling to address the issues and continuously says the child should be able to decide. I have a few mild cases where the parents agreed voluntarily to do reunification therapy. However, in these cases, both parents were highly motivated to stay out of court. The alienation was mild and had not been going on for very long. But these cases are few and far between. Most cases, you're going to need a court order. Second, you need to get a lawyer familiar with alienation to help you get that court order. You're going to need a good lawyer who's familiar with alienation to assist you in getting a court order for reunification therapy. Talk with your lawyer and put together a plan to present to the judge with names of a few reunification therapy candidates that could do the treatment. Any steps you take to make the job easier for the court increases your chances of getting reunification therapy ordered. Third, get an experienced therapist. Do your homework and find a good therapist that's familiar with high conflict cases and understands what alienation and estrangement really are. I'll give you a checklist of those qualifications in the next segment. Fourth, get a good order put into place. An order should include the name of the therapist, to keep the alienating parent from doing what we call therapist shopping. Over time, the alienating parent will probably try to change the therapist. And if it's written into the order, it will make it very difficult. It should say the therapist will conduct family reunification therapy and that all family members are required to participate in the treatment, including anyone living with a child, like step-parents, step-siblings, even grandparents. Oftentimes, in the court system, judges are trying to find a way to help these cases, so they assign individual therapists to all the children and the adults, not understanding that the best form of treatment for resist-refuse cases is family therapy. I tell therapists, parents, and lawyers all the time, individual therapy isn't going to heal the problems in resist-refuse cases. Therefore, it's important for the order to say that all professional therapists involved with the case will coordinate with the reunification therapist, and the reunification therapist will guide the treatment plan for the child during the reunification process. This is particularly important with any individual therapist seeing the children. It's actually usually best if the child stops individual therapy or it's limited when doing reunification therapy. Richard Gardner, a pioneer in alienation treatment, felt strongly that all parties involved in these cases need to deal with one therapist because too many therapists lead to what he termed fractionalization, causing a breakdown of communication between the therapists. Splitting among therapists is a real problem in these cases. The alienating parent is very good at propagating their false narratives to all the therapists involved. Very few individual therapists are trained to understand what's happening in these cases. So you need a strong reunification therapist to guide the process. If the reunification therapist and the individual therapist are not in agreement about the treatment plan, the child runs the risk of receiving conflicting messages about reuniting. And this just recreates the pathology the child is already experiencing in the family over reuniting with the target parent. If individual therapy has been ordered, then you need to collaborate with all the therapists and educate them about what the court expects from the therapeutic process. A few other important things to remember in reunification therapy orders are to put the date by which each party will contact and by which treatment will begin. It should also define the consequences if family members don't participate. We call this the enforcement clause. So to recap, to put together a good reunification therapy process, you're going to need, number one, a lawyer who is familiar with alienation issues and can help you get an order for reunification therapy. Number two, a therapist experienced in reunification therapy. Number three, a good court order that requires all family members to participate and allows the reunification therapy to coordinate the case with all mental health professionals. In this segment, I want to talk about what qualifications are needed in a good reunification therapist. And I'm going to give you a checklist of qualifications you should be looking for when you do your research in finding a good therapist. First of all, they need to be trained in multiple areas to be a successful reunification therapist. And there is no formalized program for learning this. They're not teaching how to do reunification therapy in counseling programs. Someone asked me the other day, where do you go to get your training? Well, there's not one place you can go. Preparation for this comes from many kinds of trainings. First, you need to be trained in family therapy, particularly structural family therapy. because it's important to see the family as the identified client. I trained in family therapy while receiving my master's in social work at Simmons College in Boston. During my internship at McLean Psychiatric Hospital on the Children's Inpatient Unit with a team of psychiatrists and therapists, and while doing my postgraduate work at Cambridge Family Institute in Boston, Massachusetts. I have been fortunate enough to have worked with many quality family therapists over the course of my years in the field. And this has helped me to overcome the fear of getting in a room with a family and doing the work, which I find many therapists shy away from and never really received specific training for. Many therapists are more comfortable with individual therapy, and often the reunification therapist is just a lot of individual therapy and never any family therapy sessions. Second qualification that's needed is understanding how to work with high conflict families. High conflict families are extremely difficult because you encounter a lot of personality disorders with clients, such as narcissistic, borderline, dependent, sociopathic. These clients can be very manipulative and challenging to work with. A therapist used to managing high conflict cases is more knowledgeable about how to resist being pulled into the dysfunctional family dynamics and can more easily recognize and resist their efforts to split the professionals in a case. The therapist might have worked as a guardian ad litem, a parent facilitator or coordinator for divorced couples, and has knowledge of the family law court system in their state. In this case, I worked as a guardian ad litem for a number of years in various counties in and around the Austin area. I trained and became an approved parent facilitator coordinator in the state of Texas, which involves many hours of training in mediation, parenting issues, after divorce, and the recognition of alienation. I have testified on many cases, sat in numerous court hearings, observing and learning about these high conflict cases, which particularly helps me when working with these families. Third, you need very specific training in alienation and estrangement. You need to ask this therapist when you're researching them. Are they familiar with the 5-factor model? Are they familiar with the 17 strategies used by an alienator or the 8 manifestations seen in children when they're being alienated? What books have they read on the subject? What kinds of trainings have they attended? Are they a member of the parental alienation study group? In my case, I've attended numerous workshops and trainings with some of the leading therapists and researchers in the field of alienation, such as Amy Baker, Bill Eddy, Linda Gottlieb, Dr. Steve Miller. I've worked together with Dr. Alvarez here in Austin, and I'm also a member of the Parental Alienation Study Group. Fourth, a reunification therapist should have training in teaching parenting skills. It's important for a reunification therapist to evaluate the different styles of parenting that each parent has in the case and coach the parent on how these parenting differences can be affecting the reunification therapy process. There is an important psychoeducational piece that needs to be done around changing parenting practices. It's also important to educate parents on the effects of toxic stress on children when parties constantly subject them to ongoing sustained conflict due to their parenting differences. In my case, I have studied many different parenting programs, but I particularly use the Love and Logic parenting approach, which I have taught for over 20 years, as well as Dan Siegel's whole brain child approach to parenting, which incorporates many principles of neuroscience to teach parents the importance of developing brain-friendly parenting strategies. Both teach how to parent with compassion and empathy, and how to limit conflicts between the parent and the child. And I'm still teaching these programs today, and I weave these strategies and techniques into all the treatment I do with parents in my practice. The fifth quality of a good reunification therapist is training in the treatment of trauma. Children who have spent many years in high conflict situations can show serious signs of trauma, and a good therapist needs to evaluate what level of distress the child is experiencing. If they are experiencing extreme trauma issues, therapy needs to progress at a slower pace, and the child needs strategies for handling the emotional disruption they may be experiencing due to the reunification therapy process. Often, some past memories have been planted, and/or the child has been completely manipulated into believing events that never happened. Nevertheless, they are still experiencing the negative effects of those memories, and they seem real to them. I'll talk more about this in the treatment section. In addition, it's important for reunification therapists to recognize that two other issues often cause trauma in these cases. The first is a child may show signs of extreme distress or trauma if they have been absorbing the toxic stress between the parents for a long time. And the second is that a child may be experiencing trauma as a result of being denied access to a parent they have previously had a close attachment to. I have seen both of these issues contribute to a child becoming suicidal, depressed, developing an eating disorder, other forms of self-harm, or even substance use. But parents that are being alienated are also experiencing trauma. The trauma of not seeing their child and being part of their lives, being excluded or even erased by the other parent. They often present with extreme anger over the situation, anxiousness about the lack of communication with their child, and an ex who is shutting them out, aggressiveness about wanting to see their child, and frustration over the lack of help and understanding from family and professionals around them. If a therapist is not familiar with what alienation looks like for a target parent, they may misunderstand the target parent's behavior and see that parent as the real problem and the favored parent as the more reasonable parent. They may not realize that the target parent is suffering from trauma over these issues, and that often erratic and frantic behavior makes sense from a trauma perspective. And finally, a good reunification therapist needs training around grief and loss. Parents and grandparents that have been denied access to their children suffer from profound sense of loss. Loss of time, loss of experiences, loss of a future together with the child. They need a place to grieve and someone to understand the pain they have dealt with. Literature on loss makes a distinction between grief over the death of a child and ambiguous or complicated loss, as this is the kind of loss that defies closure. There is also the pain of watching the child's character and life being corrupted and realizing you may not be able to change it. In this segment, I want to talk about what a good reunification therapy evaluation looks like. Let's start by talking about the beginning of the process. First, I begin by meeting with each parent individually to get background and history. Then I meet with the child, usually several times, to begin building a positive relationship and hearing their concerns or their fears. It's extremely important for the child to feel safe, comfortable, and relaxed when they come to the office. So I have lots of games, snacks, candy, dogs, stuffed animals, toys, art supplies, and sand play to help them feel comfortable. One little girl even brought her pet lizard and had him sit on her shoulder when we met. Third, I review documents, videos, audio recordings, emails, psychological reports, police reports, and all kinds of information that is given to me by both parents. And finally, I talk to all the professionals involved in the case. But one thing you never do, but I have seen done by some therapists, is jump into joint sessions with the parent and the child before the evaluation is complete. I had one client that tried to pressure me into meeting without all of those steps, saying that he didn't have the money for me to do all those sessions. In this case, I let him know that he would need to find another therapist. Interestingly enough, he came up with the money. After taking all the steps above, I used the 5-factor model by Dr. William Burnett to see if the case meets the criteria for any kind of alienation, or is this a case of realistic estrangement in which the target parent has engaged in behaviors that have caused the child to resist parenting time with them. In the 5-factor model, you start by asking, is the child resisting contact with the target parent? If the answer is yes, then you ask, is there a history of a prior positive relationship between the child and the parent? If the answer is yes, then you ask, is there an abuse, a neglect, or seriously deficient parenting, which could include abandonment for long periods of time? If no, then parental alienation is possible, so it needs to be explored. To explore if parental alienation is occurring, there are 2 models that are used. First, the alienating parent is evaluated to determine if they are engaging in any of the 17 strategies that an alien parent uses when alienating a child, such as bad-mouthing, limiting contact, telling the child the target parent is dangerous, unloving, abusive, neglectful. Next, the child is evaluated to determine if they are exhibiting any of the 8 manifestations of alienation. Then, if I find alienation to be present, I have 2 more issues to evaluate. First, I evaluate the level of severity of the alienation, as there are different types of reunification therapy for different levels of severity. Second, I need to evaluate the parenting style of each parent, as this greatly influences the treatment process. When evaluating the level of severity, it's important to remember that alienation exists along a continuum, mild, moderate to severe, and I need to determine what level of alienation is being experienced to treat it appropriately. If you're being alienated from your child or your grandchildren, it's important to understand what level of severity you're experiencing so that you can advocate for the proper kind of treatment. Here are some of the criteria to look for when evaluating what level of alienation is being experienced. Mild. A child will complain about going to the rejected parent's house, but they do go, and usually they have a good time. The favored parent values the child's relationship with the target parent, but occasionally displays misguided protective behaviors. The child may exhibit some short-lived transitional issues when leaving the favored parent, and there's minimal bad-mouthing of the target parent that might be occurring from the favored parent. And the favored parent is usually compliant with the parenting plan, and all family members are willing to attend treatment. In moderate alienation, a child displays more resistance to seeing the target parent, complains more, and contact becomes more sporadic, infrequent, and delayed with the target parent. The child minimally participates in the parenting time and displays periods of oppositional behavior. The favored parent's overprotection unwittingly or intentionally undermines the child's relationship with the target parent. The transitioning parents are harder and last longer. And there's increased bad-mouthing of the rejected parent. There is inconsistent compliance with the possession and access schedule or court orders. And the child and the favorite parent attend treatment sporadically, often cancel or change appointments. Severe alienation. In severe alienation cases, the child completely resists going to the rejected parent's home, or if they do go, they run away or refuse to talk or interact. The favored parent identifies their actions as protecting the child, often despite repeated investigations or evidence to the contrary. The target parent is having infrequent contact or no contact with the child. There are chronic parent-child disruptions and extreme oppositional behavior from the child when they're with the target parent. And often there are claims of abuse that are made against the target parent by the alienated child. And there is no compliance with the possession and access schedule or orders by the favored parent. And the second thing I evaluate when I'm looking at these cases is the parenting style of each parent. This will significantly impact the treatment plan. And I look for 6 different possible styles. The first is authoritarian drill sergeant style. In this style, parents are clearly in charge, and children are expected to fall in line no matter what. This is a less nurturing style, with many more limits and rules. Authoritarian parenting lacks flexibility because the overreaching rule is, it's my way or the highway. This kind of style views respect as a one-way street. Children have to respect parents, but parents don't have to respect children. This is often the style being used by the target parent. Then there's permissive parenting. Permissive parenting is a very nurturing style, but with very few limits. Permissive parents want to be their child's best friend. And permissive parenting can also force children to make too many choices before they're ready. This is often one of the styles used by the alienating parent. I see lots of alienating parents that go overboard, showing how much more relaxed they are than the target parent, and repeatedly pointing out how flexible they are compared to the drill sergeant parent. Number 3, we have the uninvolved parents. Uninvolved parents are permissive minus the nurturing. They're almost completely hands-off. They like to be relaxed and be the fun parent. They're often distracted with their own life, personal relationships, work, or substances. They feel if the child doesn't like something, they don't really have to do it, and the parent isn't there to encourage them to follow any rules. This style is also often used by the alienating parent. And the child likes this style because they're pretty much left to do whatever they want to do. Number 4, we have the helicopter parents. Helicopter parents want to protect their kids, keep them happy, set them up for success so badly that they become over-involved in their lives. They are nurturing, involved parents who are actually very controlling. They wind up micromanaging their children's life. Many of the alienating parents I work with have this parenting style, and they feel they must be involved in every aspect of the child's life. They particularly don't like them being at the other parent's home, where they feel the other parent can't really meet their needs appropriately. They make comments that cause the child to believe they're better off at their home. And these parents constantly check on the child, either through phone calls or cell phone texting, which, by the way, they usually gave to them. Number 5 is free-range parenting. This is a somewhat permissive style of parenting, but it can include plenty of rules and guidance. They're trusting kids to do more for themselves, and they think they can handle these things. They believe they grow more resilient once they discover their own resourcefulness. But if parents apply it to a child who isn't ready for more independence, it can veer into neglectful territory. This is another parenting style used by the alienating parent, which can be particularly dangerous, as it often empowers the child to feel that they are more in charge than the adults. These kids often say, "I can live with whomever I want." 6, authoritative coaching parenting style. This parenting style has structure and enforces rules, but not without discussing them and the reasons behind them. Kids are welcome to provide input and ask questions, though they don't get the final say. They know the adults in their lives are ultimately in charge and make the final decisions. Rather than telling them, "Just do as I say," they're able to have a dialogue, respond, be flexible. And the research shows it strikes the best balance of all the parenting styles. So I try to evaluate parenting styles of each parent because in most cases I work on, parents have very different styles, and this puts the child in a difficult place once a divorce occurs. If one parent is more permissive and excessively nurturing, and the other parent is more structured, inflexible, or less empathetic, the child often gravitates towards the less permissive, more uninvolved, or free-range parenting style. And parenting styles often get accentuated in cases where alienation is occurring. If both parents don't encourage and require the child to stick with each parent's allotted time and respect the other parent's rules, alienation will creep in. One of the most important factors, however, is the pairing of parenting styles. Different parenting styles can greatly amplify problems. By far, I see in my practice that the most problematic pairing is authoritarian parents versus the permissive parent. This common parenting style greatly contributes to alienation and estrangement. This is problematic because the authoritarian parent feels it's harmful to the child to be given so much freedom by the favored parent around things like video games, bedtimes, homework, food choices. The authoritarian parent feels strongly that the child needs structure, but often goes overboard, or has little empathy for the child's complaints about things being different at the favorite parent's house. Usually, they make the mistake of being too inflexible about adjusting any rules, and they're often unwilling to listen to the child's opinion about things. They'll say, "This is my house and you're going to do as I say. You just don't get enough structure at your mom's house, and you need to respect my rules." Permissive parents use the authoritarian parent's rigidity against them with the children and overcompensate by being excessively nurturing and having very few rules. Permissive parents want to be their child's best friend, which they feel wins them favor with the child and makes their home the more comfortable, relaxed, fun house to be at. Your dad just doesn't understand you kids. They also will constantly check on their children by text or phone when at the other parent's house to see if the other parent is being unreasonable, which they often label abusive, and will then offer to come get the kids from the unreasonable parent's house. Another difficult parenting style pairing is authoritarian versus helicopter parenting. The authoritarian parent is very inflexible, and any mistakes by the child are often met with fairly strict consequences, often being excessively harsh and out of proportion to the misbehavior. This child feels they have been unfairly treated and not listened to. Helicopter parents want to protect their kids from the harsh and critical parent and feel that the child's happiness and instant gratification of their needs is of primary importance. They will go out of their way to do things that the target parent might want to be involved in, but they say the child needs them instead. For instance, a mom saying she needs to take her daughter to all the gymnastic events because she knows how to get the child ready. They become extreme micromanagers of their children's lives and even try to micromanage the time they spend or don't allow them to spend with the target parent. They may say things like, "Do you need anything? Didn't Dad take you to get new shoes? Don't worry, I'll do it when I come to pick you up." Another problematic pairing is authoritative versus uninvolved. Authoritative coaching parents are more flexible. They enforce rules, but they're not without discussing them and the reasons behind them. Kids can provide input and ask questions, but they don't make the final decisions. Even though this is considered the most effective parenting style of all the ones discussed, even it can be problematic with an uninvolved parent. Their reasonable rules and discussions fall short of the uninvolved parent's reluctance to take a stand on any parenting issue, feeling that the child should mostly do what they want, and it's usually too much trouble to rearrange their life and get more involved. Uninvolved parents are often not physically or emotionally present for their children, being preoccupied with their work, trips, friends, relationships with significant others, or struggling with issues such as drinking. These kids come to really resent the authoritative parent, having any rules, and feel they don't need an adult helping them with their life choices. They've been on their own a lot, and they don't need anyone telling them what to do. If the authoritative parent doesn't do what they want them to do, they often say, "You never listen to me," which means, "You're not doing what I want, and I don't want to be around you anymore. I like running my own life." They start refusing to go to the target parent's home, where there are rules and structures, and alienation creeps in despite good parenting. So to review, the least effective parenting style for a parent whose child is being alienated is authoritarian, and the most effective parenting style for a child who is being alienated is the authoritative coaching style. This style is more effective because rather than telling them what to do, you have conversations and dialogue with them around why they are upset with you. explains why you want them to spend time with you. Why, when they are at your house, you ask them to follow certain rules. For example, using cell phones, rather than just taking it away. Have a conversation about appropriate use and why you want them to not always be on the phone with the other parent when they're with you. You want to make them feel comfortable asking questions about things they may have heard from the favored parent that cause them to feel upset with you and cause them to wonder if the things they are hearing are true. Encourage them to bring their concerns to you if they are feeling confused. Reassure them that you will not get upset when they are asking questions and wanting to know about issues they don't understand. I'm not saying this style will totally prevent alienation from occurring, but I am saying it is your best option against losing your relationship with your child. Less conflict is one of the best strategies for preventing alienation from occurring and keeping at least some kind of relationship with your child. In this segment, I want to talk about number 5 on the roadmap, techniques and strategies used by experienced reunification therapists in the treatment process. And I'm going to break it down by mild, moderate, and severe alienation. When treating mild alienation, parents are receptive to changing their behavior when it's brought to their attention. They respond well to family therapy and family psychoeducational approach. They believe that both parents having a good relationship with the child is important. And the main issue for them is being able to sit back and objectively look at their behavior. One or both of the parents may need some guidance in changing some of their parenting strategies. One of the biggest contributing problems I see in mild to moderate cases of alienation is when the target parent is often repeatedly engaging in certain parenting behaviors that blow up in their face, making their situation even worse. I call this stepping on the landmines. When they do this behavior, it gets exaggerated, pulled out of context, and the situation often ends up with the police being called or reports being made to CPS. I tell all my target parents, whether they are dealing with mild, moderate, or severe alienation, they need to up their parenting game. And the target parent often needs coaching on how to adjust behaviors that are exacerbating the alienation. I discuss with them the most problematic parenting styles that I see that inevitably contribute to alienation getting progressively worse if not addressed. And that helps them to avoid the landmines. An important strategy the target parent can use to keep the relationship with their child is to practice what is called positive pathogenesis. This is where parents are able to gain power to influence their child's behavior when most of the interactions between them are positive, and reinforce positive feelings when they are together. So in these cases, you need to be on top of your parenting game. Treatment for moderate alienation. Moderate cases required psychoeducation and more intensive family therapy to be successful, and definitely require a court order. Therapy should follow a family-based intervention plan. This means everyone from the target parent to the alienating parent to the siblings and the parent's significant others, even grandparents that are caretakers, need to be involved. Most often, I see the alienating parent say the problem is between the child and the target parent. They don't need to be involved. I always correct them immediately and let them know how important they are to the process and that I will most likely need their help in reuniting the child with the target parent. If the child is particularly reluctant or out and out resistant to meeting with a parent, then I have the alienating parent meet with the child and myself and discuss how important it is for them to start spending time with the target parent and attend family therapy with the target parent. This information needs to come from the favored parent because they currently hold all the power in the parenting dynamic in the family. The target parent has usually been partially or completely disempowered to influence parenting issues by the time a case gets to the moderate stage. Equally important is for me to work with the alienating parent to discover the strategies or themes they have been engaging in that have caused the child to push away the target parent. I then start having them engage in corrective behaviors to free the child from the loyalty bind that they are experiencing and allowing them to be able to begin the bonding process with the target parent again. In one case I had, where the mother was being alienated from her son, he was only reluctantly going to visits and then would not engage in any conversation or activities with the mom. He then began to make disrespectful and hurtful comments to the mom. She was not sure what to do because she knew from our coaching sessions that she needed to avoid any big confrontations or emotional outbursts on her part if she wanted to have the parenting time go well. I finally called the dad and told him what the child had been saying to the mom and the kind of behaviors the child was exhibiting when he was with the mom. I asked him to come in and talk with his son in a session, lay down some ground rules for future interactions for the mother. The father did come in, and he was willing to set these limits with the boy and let him know that it was not appropriate for him to talk to his mom in that way or to treat her so disrespectfully. He let the son know that there would have to be a consequence if he continued to treat her this way. He then discussed with his son how important his mother is in his life and that he needs to go on visits and work on the relationship with her. After the boy really settled down and they began to have better interactions together, the mom did not have to get into a big conflict with the boy and then began to spend more quality time together. These cases are very hard on the target parent, and often they want to throw in the towel because of all the emotional and financial stress and abuse they feel in this process. However, one of the most important roles as a reunification therapist is helping them understand how important it is for them to keep trying and stay involved. If they do not keep trying, they run the risk of reinforcing the alienating child's belief and the alienating parent's narratives that the target parent really doesn't love them. In moderate cases, the reunification therapist needs to do a great deal of exploring around why the child is resistant to being with the target parent. We discuss these answers and do reality testing in a non-confrontational way, which can allow the child to do their own reality testing and come to some reality-based answers. These children have not learned to use critical reasoning skills when confronted with statements or innuendos from the alienating parent. And I'd like to talk for a moment about treating trauma in alienation. A certain percentage of these children exhibit signs of trauma and show excessive fear and anxiety when they come to see me. When this is the case, trauma needs to be assessed and carefully understood. In some instances, the child wants to continuously tell me about the bad experience they have had with the parent and why they don't want to see the target parent. In this case, I work with the child to disengage from repeatedly reinforcing negative thoughts about the target parent and begin to focus on anything positive the child might have experienced with that parent. I often use desensitization strategies to assist the reunification therapy process, such as looking at pictures of that target parent, watching a video of the target parent, enjoying themselves with the target parent, or having the parent write a letter and then reading it with the child. Doing initial sessions over Zoom without having the parent in the actual room with the child. Showing a video of the target parent talking to the child. Do role-playing to prepare for talking to the target parent. And teach relaxation techniques for managing the anxiety. In some cases, I find it is not helpful after my initial session with a child to repeatedly discuss any of the actual negative events that occurred between the child and the target parent. Continuing in-depth discussions about these events may cause the child to feel re-traumatized. So I give them the choice of how much or how little they want to say to a parent about an incident that may have occurred. Even if the parent knows a particular event did not occur, I encourage the target parent to listen to the child, and I work with the target parent to craft a careful response to an allegation. But my focus in most situations is to discuss moving forward together in a healthy way. Finally, let's talk about treating severe alienation. Probably a number of you listening are struggling with severe alienation. And I know it may feel at times like you are in a hopeless situation. And these cases are the most difficult to treat. These cases do not respond well to psychoeducation and moderate therapeutic interactions. If you have been doing therapy with a family for 3 to 4 months, and the alienating parent refuses to change any of their alienating behaviors, refuses to attend treatment, or finds numerous reasons for the child not to attend, continues to say statements such as, "I don't know why this child can't be allowed to decide what they want to do. Why aren't we listening to these child's feelings? I will not make him go if he doesn't want to go." Well, then you know you've crossed into the severe territory. At this stage, psychotherapy will not prevent the entrenchment of alienation in cases that involve a favored parent that is determined to erase the other parent from the child's life. And the alienating parent usually suffers from serious personality disorders. These parents have little to no ability to gain insight into how their behavior is affecting their child. Alienating parents typically demean mental health treatment or seriously undermine the treatment. And at the first sign that the therapist feels their behavior is unreasonable and that the child should have more time with the other parent. In severe cases, the research shows that the best option is often to place the child in the target parent's custody and suspend contact between the child and the alienating parent. But this kind of treatment is very difficult to get the courts to order and usually comes only after a number of court hearings and custody evaluations. It is usually the treatment of last resort, and the court usually has to be convinced that there is no other treatment option before it's considered. But it is being ordered, and it's not impossible. I have had cases come to me from various states looking for a treatment for serious alienation, and it was ordered. It can be accomplished, and this gives the child and the target parent the best chance of reuniting, because the target parent and the child get uninterrupted time to repair the relationship, with 90 days or more of no contact being the most beneficial according to current research. If the court will order an intensive reunification therapy for the target parent and the child, these intensive reunification programs can alleviate much of the initial distress a child might experience with a custody change, and help guide the child and the target parent back to a loving, working relationship in a very short amount of time. These programs do exist, and you may have heard about some of these programs. And I also offer a 4-day intensive reunification program here in Austin. I am amazed at how these programs can so dramatically change a parent and child's relationship in such a short amount of time. These interventions can be truly miraculous and healing for the parent and the child. In our final segment, I want to talk about number 6 on the roadmap, the 3 biggest mistakes made by professionals doing reunification therapy. Mistake number 1, everyone is in individual therapy and no one is in family therapy. Or almost no joint sessions have occurred between the child and the target parent. And number 2, not having the order include that the alienating parent be part of the treatment and only trying to do treatment with the target parent and the child. So I had a client who I consulted with on his case that shows how both of these mistakes affected the reunification therapy process. His child started resisting going with him on his visits shortly after he and his wife were separated. Up until that point, he had been the child's primary caregiver, as his wife worked in the entertainment industry and was gone a significant portion of the time. When the dad went to pick the child up for his parenting time after the separation began, the little girl started to cry, and the mom stepped in and said, "If she doesn't want to go, I don't think we should make her go today. We don't want to upset her anymore. This separation has been hard enough on her." Well, the dad agreed not to force her, but at the next exchange, the child cried even harder and began kicking and screaming. The dad was so surprised by his behavior that he agreed again not to have the child go with him. Now you can probably see what happened here. This pattern became so entrenched that of course the child finally refused to even be near the father, and the mom said that his daughter was saying she was afraid of him and that she wouldn't send the daughter to any more visits. At my insistence, this father finally got a lawyer and went to court to ask for reunification therapy for him and his young daughter. The court hearing did not find that the dad had abused or neglected this child, nor had there been the issue of any seriously deficient parenting. A reunification therapist was assigned to the case, and when I met with my client 4 months later, I learned that he had not, as of yet, had one single joint session with his daughter. This therapist was only seeing everyone individually and still trying to understand the situation. I inquired as to whether the mother had been asked to be involved and help with the reunification process, or if the mother was meeting with the reunification therapist to address her issues with the reunification process. My client said that the reunification therapist had met with her once, and the rest of the therapy had been done with him and his daughter individually. The reunification therapist said that the daughter still didn't feel comfortable meeting with the dad, and she didn't want to push it. Consequently, the therapy was failing because these 2 big mistakes were being made by a psychotherapist who got pulled into the mother's dysfunctional psychopathology and could not see the limits that needed to be set in order to move the reunification therapy along. This child has not seen this father for over a year, and therapy is not producing any changes. Mistake number 3, allowing children to repeatedly discuss and dwell on what the target parent did wrong. Allowing the child in the reunification therapy to repeatedly go over and over all the target parent's bad qualities and bad experiences they feel they had together just empowered these children to become more entrenched in their false narratives that are created by the alienating parents. Some of these children even go so far as to recreate the abusive, aggressive, disrespectful behavior with the parent in the therapy session, becoming extremely emotional dysregulated, causing the target parent to feel attacked and denigrated. This pattern of venting their anger and frustration on the parent recreates the alienating patterns that were begun by the alienating parent and teaches the child nothing about how to resolve or move forward with the relationship with the target parent. If this is happening to you, it's important to cut off this negative therapeutic experience and find a therapist that can teach what appropriate communication between a parent and child should look like. Reframe the negative narratives that have become entrenched due to the alienating parenting behavior and teach critical thinking and problem-solving skills. Spend more time talking about how to move forward than getting stuck on the negative interactions in the past. That does not mean that you don't ever look at patterns of behavior from the past that may have contributed to the breakdown in communication between the child and the target parent. But it is important to focus more on the reunification therapy moving forward in a healthy way and building upon positive experiences. I tell the child if they are starting to engage in this behavior and that we are not here to decide whether they will reunite with their parent. That has already been decided. We are looking at how to move forward in the most productive and positive way. Too many therapists get stuck in re-examining the past situations and allow the target parent to be repeatedly abused by the child. They empower the child to think they can decide whether they should have a relationship with that parent. They fail to teach the child the importance of having a relationship with the target parent. I hope that you have a better understanding about the roadmap for a successful future-forward reunification therapy process. For reunification therapy to be successful, a family needs to move forward out of the past cycle of negativity, sadness, judgment, and blame. And they need competent, knowledgeable people to help them to get on that path. Although reunification therapy is in its early stage of development as a treatment modality, and although we still have much to learn, my goal with this presentation has been to educate parents, family members, and clinicians about what the future of reunification therapy should look like, with the hope that if you have the opportunity to reunite with your child, this knowledge can help you to feel more empowered when seeking treatment. Thank you for the opportunity to share this information with you today, and never, never, never give up hope of reuniting with your child. Thanks so much for joining me today. Feel free to email me at contact@lisarothfuss.com or visit my website, lisarothfuss.com. Or you can phone me at 512-643-2851. And check out some of my other YouTube videos, including What Alienated Children Won't Tell You, and my videos on reunification and alienated parenting issues.